This is going to be a part two to my previous video, why you should never hire a mangina. And in the previous video, I discussed many of the reasons why you should not hire a mangina, including the two core reasons, which were he gives female coworkers a pass for unprofessional behavior, and he's not a problem solver. You see, your mangina is afraid of conflict. And in the workplace, there's conflict every day. And instead of dealing with conflict, this is the kind of guy who will either go hide in his cubicle, hide in his office, or if he's outside, he'll just go find some place to hide. He is not a man who will communicate with coworkers, find out what's going on with them, find out where they are on certain things. He avoids conflict at all costs, and that makes him really ineffective on a job. You see, when you have people in a workplace, their purpose there is to get work done, to help meet goals, and this guy doesn't want to meet goals because he wants to avoid conflict. Um, and conflict is a part of work every day, and conflict is a way of life on a job. And this is what this guy does. He avoids it on the regular. Um, and the other part is that when he's involved with female coworkers, he just gives them a pass. A female worker can come in late. He will not discipline her. He will not give her any sort of warning. A female can turn in work late. He does not hold her accountable. He doesn't ask her what she's doing. He gives her all sorts of passes, and all of this can impede the productivity of a workplace and decrease worker morale because he's giving out favors and avoiding conflict. People become frustrated and their morale goes down because they don't feel like they're getting supported, especially when this guy is in a management position. And there are other behaviors that he participates in that I'm going to go into in this video. In this video, I'm going to talk about his social behaviors in the workplace. When you have a mangina in the workplace, in addition to the hiding and the um, from conflict and giving women a pass, he is a very, very dysfunctional, disruptive person to have in the workplace. You see, when you bring your mangina into the workplace, he often brings a lot of havoc with him. Your mangina is the type of man to participate in gossip and start rumors, and that can undermine your office's work morale and your work environment by destabilizing it. He's the kind of guy who will sit here and, you know, he makes excuses for unproductive workers, like especially if they're females that he likes. He'll make a whole host of excuses for her. And he's the kind of guy who will try to start trouble with male coworkers he likes. And he does little petty passive aggressive things to get under the skin of people. He's the kind of guy who will steal stuff off people's desks and then say he doesn't know where it is, and then watch while people, go around scrambling to find things. Or he's the guy who, if he's a manager, you'll turn in a report with this guy, and he'll say you didn't give it to him. And that can slow down your productivity, especially if if this project is something that you're going to need for a major contract. This is the kind of guy, he'll do these little types of things because he doesn't like people, he's not comfortable with people, or people are proving to be more productive than he is, or they're just people who he just doesn't feel, belong in a certain place. These are some of the destabilizing things this guy does. I've seen quite a few of these behaviors firsthand, and I've run into these guys, quite a bit in the workplace. Again, I ran into one of them when I was working at the AmeriCorps with Strive. One of them, he was a manager there, and I was working on a project, and he asked me to give him a draft for a directory I was supposed to be writing. I give him a draft of the directory. A couple days later, he comes back and asks for it again. And I knew he had it. It was sitting right on his desk, but he asked for another one. And that showed me the passive aggressiveness, that these guys participate in. They play little games like this because they want to appear competent, but what they want to do is make you appear incompetent. And they do that because they feel really insecure in the presence, especially of other men who they know can compete with them. They feel very uncomfortable in their presence, so they try to pull little passive aggressive games in the hopes of getting under people's skin. When you're dealing with this kind of guy, in his games, they can really, get in your head, because these guys, they like to gaslight people. They like to play these little manipulative games where they, lose documents, where they lose files, um, where they, tell you to go and do certain things. I remember, again, on this job at Strive, this guy would just tell me to go home at 4:45, and I would do that, and then CEO comes and talks to me one day and says, "Why are you leaving at 4:45?" and tried to, set me up like in ways like that. And this is the way these guys operate. They play all sorts of, manipulative games to make you appear incompetent. They'll tell you to do one thing, you'll tell them so and so told you to do it. Then when other bosses go to so and so, he'll say, "I didn't tell him to do that." That's a classic mangina trap. And if you're not smart, you'll fall right into it, because this is how this guy, he wants to sabotage people, and that's really counterproductive to a company. When you hire talented workers and you bring a mangina in, he's going to try to undermine your employees, sabotage your employees, and that's going to destabilize your work environment and, lower your work morale, and it's going to lead to a work environment where it becomes unbearable. And when you have an environment like that, your turnover rate is going to increase. And when your turnover rate increases, guess what? You're spending money that you wouldn't have to spend, because when you have to replace workers, that costs you money. And this guy, he turns your business from a profitable business into a money pit, and that's all because he doesn't like certain people. He's attracted to some woman, and there's a coworker there, and he wants to eliminate that coworker. So he's going to try to sabotage your coworkers at your business's expense. And this is why you have to be very careful about this having this guy in your company. You really have to make every effort to document his behaviors and make efforts to terminate this guy, because this guy is going to really cost your business in the long run. Because if you have this guy on long term, he's going to do things to sabotage your coworkers, disrupt your work environment, decrease the worker morale, and it's going to lead to turnover, and turnover costs you money, because you're going to be thinking that it's all these employees that are the problem, when it's this mangina that is the problem. And this guy is sucking up all your money. He thinks that he's going to make, a smooth world for himself, because that's what the mangina really ultimately wants to do in your work environment. He wants to get control so he can make this smooth world of perfect people, um, that will fit his needs. Um, he'll try to create that environment very slowly, and you have to be very careful with this guy, in trying to create a smooth world. He wants that world where, he doesn't have to deal with any conflict, he doesn't have to be responsible for anything, and he creates these surrogate dysfunctional roles, especially if he's in management. He'll create these surrogate roles, and try to recreate the codependent relationship he had with his mother, because he'll always make sure that he has a woman in place doing the work for him, just like he had when his mother was doing work for him. Now, I had to deal with two manginas when I worked at Strive back in 2000. That was the first one I dealt with in the social service office. The second one I dealt with was a vice president. And this was another guy. He saw me doing exceptional work, and he had to even say I was doing exceptional work. And this was a dude, he invites me to lunch and says, we're going to discuss my future in the organization. And it looked like I was going to get a job there. And he tells me right at the lunch, he has no place for me in his organization. And that was another classic mangina move. Manginas, again, they set people up to destroy them, because they feel inadequate in the presence of other men. They feel uncomfortable in the presence of other men. And manginas don't like to compete. Manginas don't like to compete primarily because, again, that causes conflict. Not only conflict on the outside because they have to compete with another worker, but on the inside because they feel inadequate on the inside about themselves. You see, a man who feels confident about his work rate and his work ethic has no problem with competition, because he has no problem coming out here and doing what he needs to do, because he understands that, what he's doing is in the best interest of the organization, and it's about, making sure that everybody gets their needs met. But with the Mangina, he's not thinking about meeting the organization's needs and helping everyone get their needs met. He's thinking about feeling and making his world smooth. He wants to feel comfortable. He wants to avoid any sort of conflict or any sort of issue. And while he's trying to avoid conflict and issues, what's really happening is the organization is going into chaos. And that's what happened with this vice president at Strive. He wanted a smooth world, and then the organization went into chaos. I mean, while I was at that term there, 90% of the employees who work there pretty much resigned under this guy's leadership, and that was all because he didn't want to deal with conflict. He didn't want to deal with issues, and he pretty much, was dysfunctional. And when you deal with these guys, again, they'll on the outside have all of these education and all of these credentials, and they'll come from top universities, and they'll be, very very articulate, very well spoken. They'll appear intelligent on the outside, but when you look at their work, they can never, finish anything. A professional, like myself, can finish. And the reason why we finish is because we want to get started on the next project and we want to move on. This guy will always be, stuck in the same place, and he'll never finish anything. And that's going to slow your productivity down too, because if you can't finish anything, if you can't finish projects within a certain time, you're never going to meet your organization's goals, and you're never going to be able to get your organization to compete in the business world. What's going to happen is this guy's going to slow down your productivity with his inability to finish and his disruptive antisocial behaviors, and you're going to wind up losing talented workers, and you're not going to be able to meet the goals that you set for your organization. Whenever you have this mangina in place, there's just nothing but chaos and havoc in the workplace. And you can tell that he's in a workplace because you're going to see, sullen facial expressions when people come into work. People have a very, very lethargic attitude about work. They're very apathetic about work. People, they start out enthusiastic, but after a couple of months of dealing with this guy and his toxic behavior and his toxic approaches, he literally sucks the life out of an organization. And in between his drama, his rumors starting, his just backbiting, his ability to start feuds between coworkers, he makes things personal. He uses ad hominem attacks and shaming tactics, and yes, his world. He turns your world into a nightmare. He turns your work environment into a nightmare. His passive aggressiveness, his manipulation, and he's also very, very controlling. One of the worst business traits of a mangina is that he is very controlling. And the reason why he's controlling is because, again, he wants his world to be extremely smooth. He wants to avoid conflict, so he'll do things when things are going wrong, especially on his part. He's going to try to sweep stuff under the rug. And I saw that, not only at Strive, but I also saw it at the library where I worked at the Science Library at City College of New York. These manginas are masters of sweeping things under the rug. And they always, you know, do that with the help of the enabler, which is the female that they hire and place in a supervisory position to do all their work for them. They'll go hire this female, and she will, go along with things. And because they lack the backbone and the stones to, you know, talk about what's the problems that are going on, they'll just lie, deny, hide, and deflect. And while they're sweeping problems up under the rug, you know, the organization is not able to meet the needs of customers. They're not able to take care of, the customer's needs, and the and people are not able to get, that whatever services they're supposed to get. This guy, will pretty much, if there's a problem, he won't say that there's a problem. He won't go into the meeting and say that we have a funding issue. He won't say that, I need help. And he wants his world to be smooth, so he won't tell you that there's a big problem going on. And this is what I saw at the library I worked at. I mean, They pretty much were having a serious theft issue with books. And what they wanted me to do was, try to be almost like security, asking people if they had things in them. Instead of going to, your managers and saying, we have a theft problem, we need a security guard here. No, I don't. He doesn't want to do that because that means conflict. So ask your customer service people to, do double duty as security. And because they had an issue with overtime, where they had funding for the students and the funding for the students run out, they don't want to ask the managers for overtime for your civil service workers. So they want the civil service workers to work for free and then, come in with some off the books comp time. Again, not wanting to do your job as a manager and support your coworkers and support your workers. Um, so they come up with these cockamamie schemes and cockamamie policies, because they don't want to deal with conflict. Again, when you have a mangina in a management position, what happens is these guys let problems escalate. They let problems, rise to the surface, and then when something really bad happens, these are the first people to quit because, again, your mangina loves power, but they do not like responsibility. They do not like they do not like having to take responsibility for their actions. They will literally sweep up a mess, put it up under a rug, and then when it gets too big, they'll resign or they'll retire and they'll leave the big mess for somebody else to clean up. And usually, what these guys like to do is they'll caretake a problem. They won't solve it. That's what the rug sweeping is all about. They want to caretake this problem, slightly kind of fix it. They don't want to solve a problem. Again, when you have a professional in a job, they come in, they want to solve problems because they want to move on to the next task. The manager does not want to finish any tasks. He does not want to put a period at the end of anything. He'll, dwell on stuff and things will be messed up for years. And I, saw that again at that library where I worked at, where there were literally stacks of books in entire row sections, that did not even have barcode labels in them. And I sat there and said, that's, you talk about people stealing books, but the barcode labels are not in the books. And this was something, again, that could have been easily solved. And when I brought it up, I got dealt with in a passive aggressive way. They decided, we're going to have you do all the books. And they tried to overwhelm me. And I tried to do it to the best of my ability when I was there. And the whole thing is when you deal with this guy, again, passive aggressive behavior because he does not want to solve problems. He decides, oh, if you want to solve the problem, I'm going to make you do all of it. So it's a passive aggressive thing, and this is what manginas do. They do passive aggressive things in the hopes of, overwhelming people, frustrating people, and demoralizing people instead of saying, you know what, this is a problem that is affecting the entire organization, the entire department. It is slowing down our productivity. It is preventing us from being able to, effectively service customers, effectively meet goals. And we need to solve the problem. This is something manginas don't want to do because, again, they never want to finish anything because they don't want to be responsible. Another big, issue with your mangina is that he fears failure. He fears making mistakes. Not understanding that, mistakes are good things. Mistakes show us where we went wrong. Mistakes help us understand, what not to do, and we learn from mistakes. And that's what a good manager, he'll take. If he makes a mistake, he'll say, "Look, I made this mistake. Well, let's just learn from this, and we'll move on." And when you deal with this guy, he does not want to fail. Again, he does not like conflict. He does not like problem solving. And that's what makes him very ineffective in an organization. When you have this type of person in your organization, again, this is why your productivity grinds to a halt. And then you compound this with his rumor starting, his backbiting, his melodramatics, um, his fragile ego, his his hiding when there's conflict, and his passive aggressiveness and his controlling. You know, you have the recipe for one of the most toxic individuals in the American workplace today. And when you hire this guy, there are going to be major cues to his body language and his behavior. He's going to be one of the best talkers at the table. He's going to appear. He's going to appear intelligent. There's a big difference between an actual intelligent person and a person who appears intelligent. See, a person who appears intelligent, they may use the 50 Cent words, they may have a certain body language, but when you start to get them in and to specifics, you'll really start to see his dysfunction. When you start asking him how would he solve certain problems, how would he, delegate certain tasks to people, because problem solving and delegation are two big issues with him because he does not like conflict and he does not like to finish things. And that's a core element, to the mangina's dysfunction. And I'll even go in further and talk about, things that he does to undermine workers, because he will undermine people who are working around him who he feels inadequate with. And I've again had to deal with that, and I talked about that with with the other two guys at Strive, and I'm going to talk about the guy I worked with at City College. And this professor, you know, he came to me in a performance evaluation. Now, everybody had been saying I've been doing great work, and he comes in and says, "Oh, you're improving," trying to be paternalistic, trying to minimize my work. And then, as we're talking to performance evaluation, he says he's going to be looking for someone with a sales and customer service background. Basically, making a very, very insulting statement, to a good worker. Instead of saying, you know what, I have a good worker, I value this worker, I'm going to sit here and insult this person, right to their face, saying I'm looking for somebody with a different background because I want to lower the value of this person because I feel inadequate in their presence. So it was a way to try to insult me, you know, because he already knew that in my background I was a professional writer at one time, and he really didn't understand that writers do sales. That's like a big chunk of our business is sales and customer service, because when we do inquiries to publishers and literary agents, we have to sell our work. And he just, you know, tried to insult me, and I managed to keep my professionalism while he was doing this, and I just just went along because I wanted to try to keep this job. But when you deal with this guy, and the lesson that I learned from that whole experience at City College was, when you deal with this guy, you have to be very careful, especially when he's in a management position, because this guy, he feels very insecure in the presence of those who can do better, especially men who can do better, men who are going to step up, men who show leadership skills, men who are good organizers, men who want to be team players, and men who have, natural charisma and natural energy, especially masculine energy. They feel very insecure and very inadequate, and they try to undermine people. And this is something that this guy does, and he'll wind up costing you a lot of talented people. Talented people will be heading out of the door to go get other jobs with other organizations and helping them get better. Meanwhile, this guy is sucking up your resources, sucking up your finances, and sucking up your productivity. And you will think that it's all these people who are no good. But when you start, doing the math and start thinking critically, you'll start to see that it's him and that he's the common denominator in your organization. That everybody who seems to be placed in him, near him, or around him, or on projects with him, pretty much pretty much winds up getting the life sucked out of them. They come out, losing their enthusiasm for work, losing their passion for work, not being caring about their work, and it's all because they get involved with this guy, and he literally sucks the life out of them. And the faster you get rid of this guy out of your organization, the better it will be for your employees and your coworkers, because this guy, is extremely toxic. He is a nightmare to be around. He is not productive. That's another big issue with your mangina, because again, because he never finishes anything, nothing ever gets completed, or if it does ever get completed, years later, it's always sloppy or half done, or not to a level of high quality. And this guy, the faster you get rid of him, the better your organization will be, the more efficient it will be, the more effective it will be, and you'll notice a genuine difference in the energy of your coworkers once you get this guy out of your organization. This guy, he takes enthusiastic people and he drains them of all their passion, all their heart, all their natural energy. I mean, he turns a job that people would love to come to into a job that they dread. He turns a work environment where people, will love coming to into a place that where they just lament coming in every day. And he'll do all that, and he'll be the happy one in there, having a smooth world, and everyone else will have to deal with his chaos. And that's not good for you if you're a boss or a business owner to have to deal with this kind of guy. This kind of guy, you know, he's the ultimate nightmare. And then he'll sit there and say, it's everybody else's fault. But when you look at the common denominator, when you think critically and break down, you know, all the numbers on this guy, you'll start to see that he's the common denominator for all the dysfunction in your office, all the chaos in your office, all the backbiting, all the rumors. He's the common denominator, and he's the primary reason why your business, is stalling, is not growing, and he's the one, collecting the check in the midst of all this, and getting money at your expense, and you're not getting anything of value in return in terms of productivity, um, and profit. The only person profiting is him, and the longer he stays in your workplace, the worse it's going to be for everyone. And I want everybody, to understand, this Mangina, and why you shouldn't hire him. And if he's in your workplace right now, you need to make efforts, to eliminate this person, because this is the kind of guy who pretty much puts businesses out of business and prevents them from, being the best they could possibly be. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.